Hi there, and welcome to a brief session on how to speed up your deployment of your jar files onto your devkit. Now, this session makes a couple of assumptions. One of the assumptions is that you have Eclipse on your desktop. It's on a different system than your devkit. Although it could technically be done within Eclipse right on your devkit, you'd be using your devkit as a remote server, even though it's localhost. And the goal of this is to not depend on the gradle scripts for waiting for a long time for dependencies to build your jar files and to push them over to the devkit. It is a really cool feature, don't get me wrong, but it is much, much faster to use Ant scripts, especially when you kind of know what you're doing. So in this example, what I'll do is I will make some code changes and I will show how they get pushed over to the devkit so that they can be deployed and the services can get restarted automatically and you're back up and running. Okay. So in this case, in order to set this feature up, you want to go into Eclipse, Windows, Preferences. You want to go into the Ant section and click on Runtime, and you want to put in two properties. The first property is called storageos.ip. Put in the IP address of your devkit, and storageos.password, and put in the password of your devkit. Those are the two pieces of information that Ant needs to know. And then secondly, the first time you run it, you'll have to run it a little manually using right click, but then I'll show you a shortcut on how to make it so that you can just use a quick key mapping to get your binary updated. So in this case, I'm over in the workflow service. It doesn't really matter where I am because we have build scripts set up in most of the projects, but I'm going to make a small code change in here. Let's say updating the workflow. In the workflow service, this is part of controller service. The very first time I run this, when I bring up Eclipse, the key mapping isn't going to work properly, which is a defect, but that's okay. What you do is you open up the controller service, whatever service is associated with that file. This is the last time you need to know which service is associated with the file because Ant will take care of it for you from here on out. And you click on the build.xml, and you right click, and you say Run As Ant Build. And the Ant build will run. Sorry, I happen to have a build running at the same time because I just happen to bring up Eclipse, so it's just building my workspace. Normally you wouldn't need to wait. Then I'll bring up my console window. And you'll see the Ant script actually work. And so what the Ant script is doing is it's going to connect to your devkit. It's going to create the jar file associated with that project, and it's going to push that jar file over to the devkit, and then it is going to restart the services. You see here, it took 12 seconds to build and push the jar file over to the devkit. I'll go over to my devkit, and I take a look in here, and the services just got started. So I'm going to use my when start script. My when start script is going to tell me when the API service and controller service are up and running. So I'm going to wait for those. And while I'm waiting for those, of course, because that does take a minute or so, I'm going to go back. I'm going to show you, okay, the API service is already up, so controller service is going to be up in just a few seconds. What I like to do to make this a fast process going forward, go into Eclipse, go into your key mapping. So type in key, you see keys in here. And then up in the filter text, type Ant. And scroll down a little bit, and you will find Run Ant Build. Now I click on that, and then I assign it a binding. The binding I give it is Control-Alt-B, and as you can see, it's already there. I like Control-Alt-B because Control-Alt-B is similar to Control-Shift-B, and I use Control-Shift-B for breakpoints, so it's just less for me to remember. So the cool thing about this is now I'll go back over, just verify that my controller service is up. So my controller service is up. I can now log in. I can get a list of volumes. So everything looks good, right? So if I go back over and I make another code change, say updating all of the workflow steps, which is obviously a bad message, but who cares? It's just for the purpose of showing the code change. Now, even though you can't see my fingers, I'm going to literally just say Control-Alt-B, and that jar file is getting pushed out to my dev kit. Now, you say, well, okay, that's all well and good, but I don't want to have to know my, which project things are on while I'm, making the code changes and so on. That's fine. If I go into block service, which as you know is part of the API, if I make a code change in here, say I make a code change and I say log debug, I am debugging. I can say Control-Alt-B here and look at my console output. It's creating the API service jar file automatically. So I didn't need to go over to the Project Explorer and right click and say run for any specific project. I had to do it the first time because for some reason the key mapping doesn't work properly when Eclipse first comes up. But once Eclipse comes up and you've run it once using right click, run ant build, at that point you can just cruise around all of your files whenever you make a change. If you want to push that change over to the dev kit, you just say Control-Alt-B, it gets pushed over to the dev kit, and then once the services come up, you are up and running. So if I say when start now, as you can see, it's waiting for the services to come up because they were restarted by virtue of that ant script, which is the way Gradle works as well, except for you don't have to worry, you don't have to wait for all the dependencies of Gradle to finally build and ship over that file. So as you can see here, we'll be up and running in just a few seconds with any code change. So that's the session on being able to deploy your jar files quickly. The next session that I'll show you is how to remote debug and do hot swaps quickly. So thank you for joining me.